Injustice, Gods Among Us. Injustice starts with one of the most horrifying moments in DC history. The Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois Lane and their unborn child. On top of that, he nukes Metropolis. Superman loses his reason to believe in humanity, and in one brutal scene, he kills the Joker with his bare hands. That's the exact moment the world changed. After that, Superman decides the world will never hurt him like that again. His solution is total control. No more wars, no more crime, no more second chances. He forms a regime that begins enforcing peace through fear. At first, some heroes actually agree with him. The world does become quieter, but it's quiet because people are terrified. This is what makes it dark. Superman here isn't treated like a villain. He genuinely believes he's saving the world. Batman refuses to accept Superman's new vision because he knows absolute power always corrupts. The conflict between them isn't just physical, it's philosophical. Freedom versus security, mercy versus punishment. Former friends are forced to choose sides. Watching the Justice League split apart hurts more than any punch. These aren't random enemies fighting. These are people who used to trust each other completely. As the war escalates, the comic becomes a full-on tragedy machine. Major heroes die, some in shocking, brutal ways, others fall trying to stop friends they once admired. The tone doesn't pull punches, it shows how fragile alliances really are when fear takes over. The DC universe becomes a battlefield, and no one feels safe. Every issue carries the tension that someone important might not make it to the next page. Superman here isn't evil in the beginning, he's grieving, he's angry, and he's convinced that stricter control will prevent suffering. But every compromise leads to another. Every necessary execution pushes him further away from who he used to be. The comic basically asks, if the most moral hero alive can justify dictatorship, what does that say about power? By the end, the world of injustice is fractured beyond repair. Friendships are destroyed. Legacies are stained. The symbol of hope becomes the symbol of fear. Even when resistance fights back, the emotional damage is still there. This isn't a story about a villain rising. It's about a hero falling and dragging an entire universe down with him. Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth. This comic actually feels like walking through a haunted painting. The asylum itself almost feels alive, breathing, watching, judging. When the inmates take over and demand Batman come inside alone, it doesn't feel like a hostage situation. It feels like a ritual. From the first page, you get the sense that this building isn't just holding madness, it feeds on it. The Joker here isn't loud or theatrical, he's unpredictable in a deeply uncomfortable way. Sometimes playful, sometimes intimate, sometimes violent. Grant Morrison wrote him almost as someone whose personality shifts constantly, like he reinvents himself daily. That instability makes him scarier than usual. You can't read him, and when you can't read the Joker, every interaction feels dangerous. As Batman moves deeper into the asylum, the story stops being about beating criminals. It becomes about identity. The inmates don't just attack him physically, they question him. Are you really different from us? Is your obsession with crime any healthier than ours? The comic constantly mirrors Batman against his villains. Arkham might not be a prison for monsters. It might be a reflection of Bruce's own mind. Running parallel to Batman's journey is the diary of Amadeus Arkham, the asylum's founder. His descent into madness after the murder of his family is quite disturbing. He builds Arkham as a place to heal the insane, but slowly loses his own grip on reality. By the end, it's unclear whether the asylum was ever meant to cure anyone, or if it was built from trauma and vengeance. That backstory adds another layer of dread to the present events. The artwork by Dave McCain is chaotic, abstract, and sometimes hard to read on purpose. Faces blur, colors bleed, panels feel distorted. It doesn't look like a superhero comic, it looks like a psychological horror book. The visual style forces you to feel disoriented, just like Batman. It's not clean action, it's emotional chaos on the page. By the end, Batman doesn't win in the traditional sense, he survives the night. That's it. The inmates return to their cells, but nothing feels resolved. The story leaves you with questions about sanity, identity, and whether Batman truly belongs outside those walls. Kingdom Come. It drops us into a future where the classic heroes basically gave up. Superman retired after the public sided with a more violent, reckless generation of metahumans. People didn't want hopeful symbols anymore. They wanted brutal justice, and that shift changes everything. Without moral leadership, the world becomes chaotic. The streets are filled with superpowered fights that cause insane collateral damage. It's dark because humanity didn't lose to a villain. It lost to its own taste for violence. The new generation of heroes isn't evil, but they are reckless. They fight like it's a sport. no restraint, no deeper code. They treat cities like battlegrounds and civilians like background noise. This is where the story gets depressing. The older heroes stood for ideals, these new ones stand for dominance. It feels like the world evolved past compassion and into spectacle. Watching that moral decline is uncomfortable because it doesn't feel unrealistic. When Superman finally comes back, it should feel triumphant. Instead, it feels tense. He tries to rebuild order by force, creating a meta-human prison and enforcing discipline. But here's the twist. Even Superman struggles to adapt. He's out of place in this cynical world, and his black suit visually represents that shift. He's not the bright symbol he used to be. And as things spiral out of control, you start realizing that even the ultimate hero can't simply fix a broken society. The story becomes even heavier when the old guard splits apart. Batman doesn't fully trust Superman. Wonder Woman leans toward harsher methods. Captain Marvel is manipulated into becoming a weapon. Instead of inspiration, you get pride and stubbornness. It's tragic watching legends argue while the world edges toward disaster. These aren't villains fighting. These are icons clashing over what justice even means anymore. Then comes the moment that seals the double D rating, the nuclear strike. Governments, terrified of superhuman warfare, decide to wipe the battlefield clean. The explosion kills countless of metahumans in seconds. It's not a flashy comic book death. It's very sudden. Years of legacy gone in one blinding flash. The scene is depressing because it shows how fear always wins when trust collapses. Humanity couldn't control its heroes, so it shows annihilation. Yes, the ending carries a spark of hope. Superman reconnects with humanity, so there's a promise of rebuilding. But that doesn't erase the emotional weight of what happened. The world nearly destroyed itself because heroes and civilians stopped understanding each other. Kingdom Come is dark not because it's edgy, but because it feels like a warning. It asks what happens when symbols lose meaning and power replaces principle. And honestly, that question lingers long after you finish reading. Batman Damned. This doesn't feel like a normal Batman story. It actually feels like a fever dream. Gotham is darker than usual, but not just in lighting. The city feels cursed. After a violent explosion seemingly kills the Joker, Batman wakes up injured and disoriented, unsure of what actually happened. The mystery isn't just who did it, it's did I do it? That uncertainty sets the mood immediately. Very quickly, the story drifts into occult territory. Constantine shows up, Deadman appears, demons and strange forces lurk in the background, but the comic never gives you clear answers. Is this truly supernatural, or is Bruce losing his grip? That ambiguity is what makes it unsettling. You're constantly questioning what's real. Even Batman, the guy who always has a plan, feels unstable here. And when Batman isn't sure of himself, the reader can't feel safe either. This version of Bruce isn't in control. He's physically hurt, mentally shaken, possibly guilty of murder. He lashes out, he doubts himself. The usual confident strategist is replaced by someone barely holding it together. You're watching the world's greatest detective stumble through trauma without his usual clarity. Harley Quinn's portrayal in this story is one of the darkest DC has ever shown. Her grief over the Joker is twisted, obsessive, and deeply unhealthy. There's a particular scene involving Joker's corpse that shocked readers and sparked controversy. It's graphic, uncomfortable, and intentionally grotesque. This isn't quirky, anti-hero Harley. This is raw obsession. The book doesn't romanticize her pain. It shows it at its ugliest. When Batman Damned first released, it made headlines for explicit artwork and mature content rarely seen in mainstream DC. It was one of the most major black label books, pushing boundaries in tone and visuals. But beyond the shock value, the real darkness comes from the psychological themes: guilt, repression, trauma, and the idea that Bruce may be haunted by more than just criminals. It feels adult not because it's edgy, but because it's deeply uncomfortable. By the end, Batman Damned doesn't wrap everything up neatly. There's no rooftop pose, no clean moral lesson. It leaves you with ambiguity. Did Bruce truly confront something supernatural, or did he descend into a trauma-induced spiral? And that lack of clarity is intentional. So this story isn't about justice winning. It's about confronting darkness inside Gotham and inside Batman himself. Wonder Woman Dead Earth. Dead Earth opens with Diana waking up centuries in the future, and the world is gone. Skyscrapers are skeletons, oceans are poisoned, humanity is barely surviving in scattered, desperate tribes. This isn't your usual apocalypse but will rebuild story. It feels final, cold, and heavy. Wonder Woman isn't stepping into a crisis. She's stepping into the aftermath of total failure. So the Earth was obliterated by nuclear war. Radiation twisted creatures into massive, horrifying monsters. Civilization mutated. Survivors are paranoid and divided, clinging to scraps of technology and hope. The tone is bleak because there's no functioning society left to save. Diana isn't trying to restore order, she's trying to keep extinction from finishing the job. For Trinity fans, Batman and Superman are dead. Not in a dramatic, last-stand heroic splash page way, they are just gone, part of the old world that destroyed itself. Their absence hangs over the entire story. Wonder Woman is left carrying the weight alone. No Clark to inspire her, no Bruce to challenge her, just silence where legends used to stand. And what makes this darker than a simple, post-apocalyptic DC story is Diana's internal struggle. She believes she might have played a role in the chain of events that led to this catastrophe. That guilt eats at her. She's not just fighting monsters, she's fighting the possibility that the world ended because heroes failed. And when Wonder Woman questions her own legacy, that's when the tone gets really heavy. Because as you know, this isn't a shiny, hopeful version of Diana. She fights with desperation. She makes harsh calls. She carries weapons that feel heavier than her usual lasso of truth and sword of justice. The battles are savage. The world doesn't reward mercy. Every victory costs something. It's a version of Wonder Woman forced to operate in survival mode rather than inspiration mode. And despite everything, Diana still chooses to protect humanity, even when humanity destroyed itself. That's what makes the story both devastating and quite powerful. Dead Earth obliterates the Trinity dynamic and strips away DC's usual safety net, but it leaves one thing standing: Wonder Woman's refusal to give up. Hellblazer Original Sin. Original Sins is where John Constantine fully steps into the spotlight. Before this, he was just a shady side character in Swamp Thing stories. Here, we finally see who he really is, and it's not pretty. The story digs into the Newcastle incident, the traumatic event that defines his entire life. Constantine tried to exorcise a demon from a young girl named Astra. He underestimated what he was dealing with. The ritual failed, and Astra was dragged to hell. That mistake breaks him permanently. This isn't a flashy origin. The Newcastle exorcism is the emotional core of the book. Constantine gathers a group of occult dabblers, thinking he can handle a powerful demon. He can't. The demon Nergal brutally punishes his arrogance, and Astra's soul is claimed. The horror isn't just supernatural, it's psychological. Constantine survives, but survival becomes a curse. He ends up institutionalized, traumatized, and haunted by the screams of a child he couldn't save. This event explains why he drinks so much, smokes constantly, and pushes people away. He knows what his mistakes cost. Nergal isn't just some random villain of the week, he's Constantine's personal demon, literally and metaphorically. The rivalry is intimate. Nergal doesn't just want to kill Constantine, he wants to torment him, humiliate him, remind him of his failure. The darkness here is personal, and Constantine isn't fighting for the world, he's fighting something tied directly to his worst memory. Every confrontation feels less like a battle and more like reopening a wound. What makes Original Sin stand out is its grounded, dirty atmosphere. This isn't bright superhero magic, it's grimy pubs, back alleys, cults in abandoned buildings, and working class Britain. The horror here feels raw. Constantine deals with racism, poverty, urban decay, and social collapse alongside demons and curses. The supernatural isn't separated from reality, it seeps into it. That blend makes the darkness feel heavier because it's not escapist, it feels close to home. John isn't a pure victim too. He lies, he manipulates, he uses people as pawns, sometimes he sacrifices others if it means stopping something worse. That moral ambiguity is central to the story. He's not Batman. He doesn't have a code carved in stone. He operates in gray areas constantly, and often people around him pay the price. That's part of the tragedy. He survives by being clever, but his cleverness damages everyone near him. So yeah, Original Sins set the blueprint for what Hellblazer would become. The Batman who laughs. This is what happens when Bruce Wayne wins and loses at the same time. In this universe, Batman kills the Joker, but Joker planned for that. A toxin is released, slowly infecting Bruce and turning him into something far worse. You get Batman's intelligence, preparation, and tactical genius mixed with Joker's cruelty and madness. He doesn't just snap, he evolves into a calculated nightmare, and once he does, everyone around him is in serious danger. This version of Batman comes from the dark multiverse, a place where realities are built from fear and the worst case scenario. That already sets the tone. Nothing good survives there. It's a world designed to collapse under its own trauma. So when this corrupted Bruce rises, there's no redemption arc waiting. No one steps in to save him. The environment itself pushes everything toward tragedy. In this world, Robin turned into something unrecognizable. The Robins are infected, twisted into feral, Joker-like creatures, almost like demonic pets that follow the Batman who laughs around. They are chained, they crawl, they grin. It's horrifying because Robin has always symbolized hope and mentorship. Here, that innocence is stripped away and turned into something monstrous. Batman and Robin is one of the most iconic relationships in comics. It's about guidance, growth, and legacy. The Batman who laughs completely perverts that dynamic. Instead of protection and training his Robins, he corrupts and weaponizes them. At its core, this story asks a brutal question. What if Batman's discipline and mission were driven by pure cruelty instead of justice? And what if Robin became the first casualty of that shift? The Batman who laughs doesn't just defeat heroes, he destroys what they represent. And given Robin such a dehumanizing fate, might be one of the darkest creative decisions DC has ever committed to the page. The Judas Contract. This storyline doesn't start loud, it builds very slowly. Jared joins the Teen Titans, acts vulnerable, bonds with them, laughs with them, fights beside them. You genuinely believe she's becoming part of the family. That's what makes it hurt, because the whole time she's feeding information to Deathstroke. This isn't a random twist villain reveal, it's calculated betrayal. The story takes its time so that when the truth drops, it feels personal. Tara here isn't brainwashed, she isn't manipulated into acting against her will, she chooses this path. She genuinely despises the Titans and enjoys deceiving them. That makes her unsettling. She smiles in their faces while planning their downfall. It's uncomfortable because you realize the team didn't just make a mistake, they completely misread someone standing right next to them. Then there's Deathstroke. Slade isn't just a mastermind here, he's deeply manipulative. His relationship with Tara is one of the most controversial parts of the story. It's inappropriate, unhealthy, and morally disgusting. And the comic doesn't sugarcoat how wrong it feels. That dynamic permanently stains his character. This isn't just villainy in the I want to conquer the world sense, it's psychological control and exploitation. When Tara and Deathstroke make their move, the Titans are systematically defeated. They are not just overpowered, they are exposed. Their trust is used against them. Watching Nightwing realize what happened hits hard because it's not about losing a fight, it's about losing faith in your own judgment. The team dynamic fractures, the family feeling collapses. That emotional damage lingers way longer than the physical injuries. This story also dives into Deathstroke's son, Jericho. Unlike his father, Jericho is kind and empathetic. His presence adds tragedy to the whole situation. Slade isn't just a cold mercenary, he's also a broken father who already lost one son. That backstory doesn't excuse his actions, but it adds weight. You see how cycles of violence and pride ripple through families, and that makes the whole conflict feel heavier. In the ending, Tara loses control not just of her powers but of herself. She goes completely unhinged, her earth-shattering abilities become symbolic of her mental collapse, and ultimately she dies because she can't handle the destruction she created. It's tragic but not in a romantic way. It's messy and self-inflicted. The story doesn't redeem her, it just leaves you with the wreckage. The torture of James Gordon. Some comic book stories don't just become popular, they become infamous. And few Batman stories sit in that uncomfortable Hall of Fame like Batman: The Killing Joke. It's often praised as one of the greatest Joker stories ever told, but alongside that praise becomes controversy, especially when you look at what happens to James Gordon. Because while Barbara's shooting gets most of the attention, Gordon's psychological torture is just as horrifying, if not more disturbing in some ways. So after Joker shoots and paralyzes Barbara Gordon, the cruelty doesn't stop there. That act wasn't random chaos, it was part of a deliberate plan. Joker kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and drags him to an abandoned carnival, stripping him naked and chaining him up. And then comes the real nightmare. Joker forces him to a twisted funhouse ride surrounded by giant screens displaying explicit, degrading photos of his daughter bleeding and violated. It's not just physical captivity, this is psychological annihilation. The goal isn't to kill Gordon, it is to break him. And that's the key to the whole story. Joker's experiment is about proving a point. He believes that one bad day is enough to drive anyone insane, that all it takes is the right trauma at the right moment, and even the most stable, morally upright man will snap. So he chooses Gordon, arguably Gotham's most incorruptible figure, as his test subject. He doesn't want Gordon dead, he wants him shattered. He wants him to abandon sanity, justice, and morality. He wants proof that the world is as broken as he is. And this was all calculated, of course. Gordon is stripped of dignity, reduced to a spectacle, and forced to confront the suffering of his own child while powerless to help her. It's deeply invasive and intentionally cruel. There's no grand criminal objective, no money, no territory, just suffering for the sake of philosophical argument. And yet, Gordon doesn't break. That's the part people sometimes forget. When Batman finally rescues him, Gordon is traumatized, shaken, and furious, but he's still Gordon, and even tells Batman to bring Joker in by the book, even after everything, even after being psychologically tortured and humiliated beyond imagination. That moment flips Joker's thesis on its head. The Killing Joke isn't just about Joker proving a point, it's about him failing to. Gordon survives the worst day of his life and refuses to become what Joker wants him to be. For many readers, it crossed the line that didn't need to be crossed. It's one thing to explore darkness, it's another to lean into it so heavily that it overshadows everything else.